Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. I'm Laura Murray, and thank you so much for listening today. We have got another powerful episode for you. Today's topic, it's a little more serious, but one I honestly think everyone has wrestled with it in some relationship. Are you in or are you out? You know what, knowing when to keep going and knowing when to let go, it's not always easy. So our guest is here to help break it down and share what you need to know. Let's take a listen.
Vesta Gauntlett, I am so excited to be chatting with you today. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
This is so exciting for me too. Okay, tell us a little bit about who you are and your background. Let's start there.
I am a journalism major, so writing and words have always been my passion. And I started to work with couples who were wanting to design their future after they've been married a while and reset. And I realized there wasn't anything out there to really help them determine if they were on the same path. And once I realized that after doing some research, I decided to write this book.
Okay, amazing. That's a great reason. What made you decide this was the right moment? Can you dive more into that to write, are you in or out?
Yeah, so obviously there's some personal experience. I was being challenged myself. And I think a lot of, this kind of material comes from personal experience. So I realized I needed something very direct to be able to reach, especially when you have a spouse who maybe isn't that engaged in reading or wanting to really dive in. I wanted something quick and simple language that says, are you going to do the things I want or are you not? Yep. And that is really what the book is. I mean, it's 50 pages on each side and it flips over. It's going to be backwards, but it flips over for husband and wife. And that's what you get to, one of two pages.
That's pretty smart. I love that. Okay, when women hear the title, Vesta, what do you hope they immediately reflect on in their own lives?
I hope my goal is that we are thinking about, is this enough? Is this really enough for me in this life? And if it's not, share the book with your spouse. The first page of the husband's side says, this book is a gift. If you've been given this book, the person still wants a life with you. Now you have to choose if you want the same thing. It's very direct. And it kind of sets the whole caliber of the book, right? This is a really small book in a way, but very powerful.
We need to be direct. This is what we need. I like that. Why do you think so many relationships linger in uncertainty instead of reaching that clear decision?
Yeah, I think there's two reasons. One, fear, obviously on both sides, fear to have the discussion, fear of what people will think, fear of how I'm going to survive if I make this choice. I know for me, having people say, like, writing this book, are you afraid of being responsible for people? There's a lot of things that come in when you're making these decisions. And also, I think it's hope, especially, I think, since I spread some of your question on the wife's side, it's hope that that person that we love is still in there and that we can reconnect with them. And I think we stay longer than we should sometimes because we really believe that. And that's why I wanted a discernment tool that let you just get right to the meat of the problem.
Right to it. Well, and speaking of, staying a little bit too long, what keeps people emotionally invested in something that maybe isn't fully working anymore? Why do we stay so long?
Yeah, there's several factors. In fact, I was talking with a little focus group earlier today because I've been traveling and I kind of asked that question. And one surprised me. One was, one person said, I don't want someone else, like another woman coming in and being a part of raising my children. So I want to stay longer, and other reasons are, you still have that emotional attachment. You still have that faith and that hope that you see that person come through. And also, I think a lot of times fear of change. People just don't want to actually pull that decision-making part of the relationship and say those words.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like the hope that you mentioned. We hope that it can work out. We hope, we've given our verbal, our dedications, we've, committed to each other, and the hope that it can be something.
That conversation has to happen. And what happens is we wait so long to have it that by the time we do, it gets very cluttered with a lot of other things, right? So this was meant to really say, we're streamlining this conversation and looking forward.
Yes. So good. Okay. How do those almost right relationships quietly reshape a person's confidence over time?
That's such a good question, because I think it's also optics, right? If it looks so great from the outside, I mean, I heard that myself, like, how can you leave? He seems so great, or whatever, right? And it's like you worry so much about what people are going to think that sometimes you stay longer than you should. And that confidence that you have in yourself just continues to erode in a
Oh,
relationship that isn't building you up.
that's so true. We constantly are worried about what other people are thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
even not that aren't even involved in our own relationship. We're worried about what others are
Exactly.
thinking. What are the early warning signs that someone is stuck in indecision rather than like a temporary rough patch?
I think the key things you need to look for is if you are constantly feeling that you are being disrespected or compromising to keep the peace, then you need to really look at what you're in, because this isn't necessarily a rough patch or a phase. If you feel that this is your modus operandi, right? The way you live every day, if you're walking on eggshells so that you don't upset the person, or you're afraid to say what you really think because you know it will lead to an escalation, those are when you need to really step back those moments and say, this is more than just a rough patch. This is something we really need to address.
And do you find this mostly works with, are we talking about like spouses, partners? Is this like in any family dynamic or friendships dynamics?
That's a good question. I do have some other iterations planned in some of those other areas. I wrote this for the partner, spouse, wife, husband situation because that's what I was coming from. But I do think that you could apply some of those in other elements, absolutely, because it's really talking about respect and valuing your partner. And if you don't have those two key elements, there's no way communication is going to happen.
Ah, so true. So true. Okay. Why is clarity often harder to access than people expect? Why is it so much harder than we think?
I think people are afraid sometimes to be honest with themselves. And when you aren't being honest with yourself and you aren't being clear with what you really want this to look like, then how is your spouse supposed to figure that out? And that's why in the
Mhm.
very beginning of the book as well, I say, do not lie to even yourself as you answer these questions, because it's a choose your own adventure book. The first page literally says 3 options and you choose your way through the book. So it has to be honest from the get-go, or you're going to not have it's not going to go where you want it to go if you're
Yeah.
lying to yourself.
Yeah. Which is what we need. We need honesty. We need it.
We
um,
both need it.
yes, it's so true. What role does denial play in keeping relationships like in limbo?
Yes. So I think a lot of us, and I'm speaking from the woman's side, obviously, we want to deny that we're not going to be able to fix this or make it work. And we feel like if we quit, we're giving up on something that we really believe in. So we deny all of the things that are happening that are really clear signs if you spoke to someone maybe outside the relationship that there
Yeah.
was something to work on. But I found for me, I was saying the things and I was just getting on the other side, the denial. Like, nope, not doing anything. There's nothing wrong. And it's like, how do you move forward if you can't get that buy-in from both parties? And that's why I wanted the tool to work for both. I did initially write one book, but it wouldn't work. I realized what I needed to say was so different to each spouse partner that I had to
Mhm.
write two.
Oh, that's a really good point. What are some of the most common emotional loops that you see couples getting trapped in? What are couples often just getting looped in, and it's kind of a cycle?
Yes, definitely money issues. That's something that just is continuous if you haven't really had a good discussion or setup of that. If anyone
Oh,
feels like they're getting an allowance, you already have degraded the relationship to something that's going to have to really be rectified if you want to survive. But I also think people get into loops of blame. They get into loops of you're never here. You know, a lot of these conversations that you just hear every day and you just get worn down. And I think if you stay in that, it's impossible for you to move forward. And that's why this is like a wake up call book. It's like if you see this book on your counter or in your house, it's like, okay, this is serious. And that's what I think women, for me, coming from my side, that's what we needed. And some men as well. Like, I really need you to know I'm serious this time. I know we've talked before, but something has to change.
something has to change. You see this book in your house. It's time to pay attention. Time to pay attention. I want to go back to the allowance thing. So a lot of couples are getting the cycle of like the money thing. When you say allowance, do you mean like literally someone, like we used to do chores when we were kids and you get paid for something you do or something like that?
Uh, Well, I know for me personally, I had, gone into a marriage with a lot of financial stability and a lot of access. And then once we were married about a year, it was just reduced. And it was like, you only have this
Mm,
much. This is it, nothing else. And it was really shocking because it wasn't what I had expected. And then also impossible. It was such a small
mhm.
amount that it was impossible. So I refused to do a lot of things because I would not have been able to do it. Well, that already tips the balance, right? So it's really hard if you set up in the beginning that way, but there are plenty of financial counselors and people that can help you get reset if you both want that.
Why do people repeat the same relationship patterns even when they intellectually like know they're unhappy?
Yeah, I talk a little bit about that in the book. It's almost like our ego won't let us win, right? We know what we're doing is hurting us, but we just can't give in. Even sometimes it's something simple the spouse is asking for. Please line up your shoes when you come in, or whatever. I call them your monkeys. So it doesn't really matter why it matters to them, but if you aren't willing to do it, it just creates that repetitive pattern of frustration. And again, very difficult to break if both people aren't vested in that.
Sure, absolutely. How can someone recognize when they're negotiating their own needs like too often?
Right. So I use the guide when I work with couples. If you don't feel like yourself, or you feel like you're compromising all the time just to keep the peace, then you are already in that area, right? You're already living in that way, because you have to recognize that if your needs aren't being met and if you voice them, it's going to cause a lot of trouble, depending on the person you're married to. It can really make it difficult for you. So if you really feel like, oh, I don't want to do this because he'll do this or she'll do that, or I'll only go with you if things become extremely conditional, you know that you have this issue.
Okay, that makes sense. What makes deciding whether to stay or leave feel so overwhelming for women? If you have someone listening thinking, well, the whole idea just sounds so overwhelming, what advice would you have?
I understand. I stayed 5 more years than I should have because I was trying all of these things and creating this. What I would say to them is take the first step. Find out truly what you have to work with, financially, support-wise, if you have children, all of those elements, but just take the first step. Have the conversation with yourself or with someone that you can reach out to, probably maybe not the spouse right away, but just to see what your options are. But eventually, the people I've worked with, they all end up working on it or not. And you're just delaying the inevitable by staying longer. It's just a delay tactic.
Yeah, that's very true.
Seize your life.
Yes. Okay, how do you help someone separate fear from intuition in a decision like this?
I think you really have to trust. And I think women, we have such great gut instincts that we sometimes tap them down because we don't want to be impolite. Yeah. We don't want to be perceived, and so it's about just really trusting your intuition. If you know this is not the life that you want to lead, then you have to ask for a change, or you have to be the change. Those are the only 2 options for us as women in these situations.
Yeah, we got to speak up. Mm-hmm. How would you say self-trust? What does that look like in a relationship context?
So I know with some of the couples I've worked with that it's very easy to erode that belief in yourself and trusting your own ideas and beliefs and all of the things that make you you. And when you have that self-trust being eroded, it's very difficult for you to move forward. So I think it's very important for you to remember who you are, what you're looking for in this relationship. And if there's still a chance and love, it is a relationship book. I want people to find joy at whichever path that works for them. Yeah. But my goal is more joy in the world, because I believe it's a ripple, right? You're happier, he's happier, kid's happier, and it just keeps going. Sure. So really trusting yourself and what you need, and that it's valid and you deserve to feel the way you feel.
Love that, Vesta. Okay, why is it often easier to talk about problems with friends, like in our friends groups, and to talk about it with them than to admit it to ourselves?
One, obviously we don't want to look like we made a wrong choice, picked the wrong person, stayed too long, all the things that we worry about when we're in this situation. But also, I believe for women, we talk to our girlfriends because they'll hold us accountable. We want that other voice. We want someone saying, that is not okay, or that's not acceptable, or you don't have to have this life or put up with this. And it helps us to be able to find the strength sometimes to make that choice. And I think it's just I think it's something we can really do for each other. So I encourage people, if they're having that situation, reach out to somebody that you know will listen.
Yeah. Find those real friends. Those are your real friends.
Yes, the real friends. I would say maybe not always your mom or someone who has a different, viewpoint. It has to be someone that you know is like going to listen to you, right?
Right. That's a very good point. How can someone tell, Vesta, if they're hoping for change versus actually seeing change?
What I would do in that situation when I work with couples is say, okay, what are some baseline things that need to change for you? And have a set time period of occurring, right? So it can't just be, oh, I'm going to do that, and then it happens once, right? So I think couples need to set that baseline for themselves on what that will be an acceptable change of behavior, and the extent of that behavior and longevity, right? Anybody can say it for a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
So my biggest thing is, if the book is here because I don't want you to be here again in a year, because that's what happens is people stay a little longer, they work on some things, and some people therapy works, counseling works. Other people, it's a lot of money that doesn't get them where they want. I know for me, it was going into a room and saying not great things about each other and then driving home together. It did not work for us, right? So I think it's about really trusting in that process and saying, this is what I find acceptable. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. But I need to know where you stand. That clarity we talked about.
Clarity. Yep. Being straightforward. That's a really good point. Okay. And wrapping up, Vesta, if someone does decide to stay, what needs to change for it to be a real rebuilding process rather than like just repetition?
I think, I don't want to say it this way, I think that both partners need to be sort of scared straight. You have to know that if you're staying, it has to be different. And I am hosting a retreat in the fall, and it's specifically about getting that new lessons, new skills, new ways of looking forward. And it's about creating what is next together and making sure that you are on the same page as you move forward. Same goals. I thought about it and said, why is there not a vision board for couples? Because me making my own and you making your own, if a guy is making one, you're not on the same path. So I'm like, let's make one together. And at the retreat, I actually mail it to you framed to put up on your wall, because I've gone to many retreats and you put the binder away and you don't think about everything, right? I wanted something very visceral, and you looked at it, and I imagine people with like whiteboard markers checking things off, right? Imagine the energy that you can focus in when you're both in line. And that's really what I want to create, is that those skills and the path for them.
That's a great idea. Couples vision board. I'm glad you created that, and you're giving people the space to do that together, because it makes sense. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, Vesta, where can we go for more information and to get your book?
Absolutely. So vestatalks.com is my website. We sell the book from there. And there's also information about the What Is Next or When retreat this fall in Portland, Oregon area. And then also on Amazon, it's available there as well.
You're amazing. Thank you for all this info. I know it's going to help many people. Appreciate your time, Vesta. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
You too. And thank you for listening to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and we will see you next week. Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.